Hi, I'm Cedric from RTINGS.com. This is the last video in our series about motion, and the subject is Judder on TVs. Judder is an inconsistent time frame, or in other words, that some frame stays on the screen longer than the other ones. Here's an exaggerated example to illustrate what it is. Judder looks like a jerky movement that isn't smooth. It is important to not confuse this with stutter, which is simply caused by watching a low frame rate content. Here's an example of a low frame rate, but without judder. It might not look smooth, but there is no judder since the time between each frame is constant. There are two main kinds of judder, the 3-2 pull down judder and frame drops. Let's first talk about the 3-2 pull down judder. That kind of judder happens when you're watching a 24 frames per second content, like a movie, on a screen that refreshes 60 times per second. 24 doesn't fit evenly in 60, so the screen will display every odd frame 3 times, and every even frame 2 times. This 3-2 pattern would create a judder since 1 out of 2 frames stays on the screen longer. Here's an example on a real TV in slow motion. You can see that half the frames are displayed for a longer period of time. All phones and tablets have that issue. Even if you're watching Netflix on your PC, you will have that issue, unless you run your monitor at a frame rate that is a multiple of 24. That kind of judder is subtle, so not everyone notices it. To test whether there is judder, we created this pattern. It's a 24 frames per second video, where the square is at each position only 1 frame every second. We then take a 1 second long exposition picture with the camera. If there is no judder, all squares will stay on the screen at the same time, so the white will be uniform. If there's judder though, all squares will have alternating brightness. A lot of TVs are able to pass this test when the signal sent is 24 frames per second, except a few budget TVs. A test that is harder though is to be able to remove the judder on 24p content that is sent over 60 Hz. For example, this will be the case if you're watching a movie on an Apple TV. The Apple TV always outputs at 60 Hz, even if you're watching a 24p movie. The TV in this case needs to do the reverse 3-2 pull down, which is basically detecting the 3-2 pattern on the 60 Hz signal and displaying the original 24 frames instead. This is a lot harder to do, and very few TVs pass that test perfectly. For example, take this Sony TV. By default, 24p works. But if I change the signal to 60p, you can see judder on our 24p pattern. On Sony TVs, you will need to set motion flow to True Cinema and Cinemotion to high. This won't create a soap opera effect, but it will force the reverse 3-2 pull down. The second type of judder is frame drops. Frame drops can be caused by the motion interpolation feature, like we saw in the previous video. If the movement is too fast and the TV doesn't know how to interpolate it, it will simply repeat the previous frame another time. This will cause judder. Frame drops can also be caused by an app that is too slow. On some other TVs, the native apps are not very fast, so some have problems keeping up with the streaming video, and some might drop frames from time to time. This is usually rare though. In conclusion, judder is due to an inconsistent time frame. If it's constant, it's not called judder but stutter. There are two types of judder, the 3-2 pull down and frame drops. Most TVs can get rid of judder with the correct settings. You can see the full list of TVs that passes this test on our website. So that's it for the motion series. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and see you next time.